Imagine this. You're sitting alone at night, scrolling through your phone, watching someone's life unfold in meticulous detail. Their morning coffee, their workout routine, their lunch meetings, their evening thoughts, all documented, all shared, all consumed by your waiting eyes. You know when they wake up, when they sleep, what they think about the day's events. They are perpetually available to you, consistently present in your digital landscape. And yet, do you truly see them anymore? Now shift your perspective. Think of that person who enters your life like a rare comet, brilliant, magnetic, but fleeting. The one whose messages aren't instantaneous, whose life remains partially hidden, whose thoughts arrive with deliberate timing rather than constant streams. The one who, when they do appear, commands the full weight of your attention. The one whose absence creates a curious gravity, pulling your thoughts back to them in the spaces between encounters. Which presence lingers longer in the chambers of your mind? There exists a profound contradiction at the heart of human connection, a psychological blind spot that most of us fail to recognize until it's shaped our entire existence. What is constantly available becomes invisible. What is strategically unavailable becomes unforgettable. This isn't mere coincidence or subjective perception. It's the architecture of human attention, the invisible framework upon which desire, respect, and influence are built. In our desperate rush to be seen, to be validated, to matter in the eyes of others, we've stumbled into a devastating trap, believing that constant presence equals deeper connection. But what if the opposite is true? What if the ceaseless availability you offer is precisely what renders you forgettable? What if the text messages you immediately answer, the social media you dutifully maintain, the constant emotional labor you provide, what if these well-intentioned acts of presence are quietly eroding your place in others' consciousness? The truth cuts against everything we've been conditioned to believe. Your strategic absence creates more psychological impact than your consistent presence ever could. Consider the spaces in music that give notes their meaning, the pauses in conversation that allow words to resonate, the visual negative space that defines an image's power. Your absence, your strategic unavailability, isn't emptiness. It's the container that gives your presence its shape and weight. Yet we fear the void. We panic at the thought of not being immediately responsive, constantly visible, perpetually engaged. We've become addicted to the shallow validation of being needed in the moment, while sacrificing the deeper power of being valued beyond measure. Ask yourself, when did you last leave someone wondering about you? When did you last create the space for someone to miss you? When did you last allow your absence to speak volumes that your presence never could? This isn't about manipulation or calculated games. This is about understanding the profound psychological mechanics that govern human perception and connection. This is about reclaiming your power from a world that has conditioned you to believe your worth is measured by your constant availability. As we venture deeper into this exploration, prepare to confront uncomfortable truths about how you've been showing up in your relationships, your career, and your digital life. Prepare to question assumptions that have silently dictated your behavior for years. Prepare to discover why the most unforgettable people you've ever known weren't the ones who were always there, but the ones whose presence felt like a rare and precious gift. The path ahead will challenge everything you thought you knew about connection, influence, and power. And it begins with a counterintuitive truth. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is no move at all. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once observed that consciousness is shaped not merely by what is present, but by what is absent. This insight, that we define ourselves as much by what we lack as by what we possess, reveals a fundamental truth about human psychology that extends far beyond abstract philosophy into the realm of your daily connections. Consider the objects in your possession that you value most deeply. Perhaps a gift from someone special, an heirloom passed through generations, or something acquired through significant personal sacrifice. Now consider the countless items you've purchased impulsively, consumed without thought, or accumulated with minimal effort? Which category holds more psychological weight in your life? Which creates a deeper imprint on your sense of self? This is the paradox of scarcity, a psychological principle so deeply wired into our neural architecture that it governs everything from our economic decisions to our most intimate relationships. When something becomes abundant, we invariably value it less. When something becomes scarce, we imbue it with heightened significance and desire. Arthur Schopenhauer captured this essence when he wrote, "We seldom think of what we have, but always of what we lack." This isn't mere pessimism. It's the revelation of a cognitive bias that shapes your perception in every moment. Your mind isn't designed to continually appreciate what remains constant. It's engineered to detect changes, to notice anomalies, to pay attention to what appears and disappears. This fundamental aspect of human cognition explains why constant presence gradually fades from conscious awareness. Psychology calls this hedonic adaptation, the mind's tendency to return to a relatively stable baseline of happiness despite major positive or negative life changes. What was once novel becomes normal. What was once exciting becomes expected. Your perpetual availability triggers this same adaptation response in others. Your consistent presence, your immediate responses, your constant emotional support, these don't register as exceptional gifts, but as expected baselines. The very consistency that you might believe demonstrates your value actually trains others to take that value for granted. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps to become one of the most profound psychological thinkers of the 20th century, understood that meaning emerges from absence. "Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except one thing," he wrote, "your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation." This freedom includes the choice of when to engage and when to create space, a choice that many have surrendered in the digital age. The psychological root of this phenomenon extends beyond simple scarcity. It touches on what Carl Jung called the shadow, those parts of ourselves that remain unexpressed, unexplored, or purposely hidden. A person who reveals everything, who is constantly available and transparent, leaves no room for this shadow aspect to create intrigue. They become psychologically solved in the minds of others, a completed puzzle that no longer requires contemplation. Yet human beings are naturally drawn to mysteries. We are meaning-making creatures who derive satisfaction from filling gaps, from wondering, from the process of discovery itself. This explains why the partially revealed identity creates more psychological engagement than the fully exposed one. Consider how this plays out in your relationships. Those who carefully curate their availability, not from manipulation, but from a place of self-respect and boundary awareness, create natural spaces for others to wonder about them, to miss them, to value their presence precisely because it isn't constant. The most respected individuals in history understood this principle intuitively. They recognized that their impact wasn't diminished by strategic withdrawal, it was amplified. Their absences weren't voids, but pregnant pauses filled with potential energy. This isn't about becoming coldly unavailable or playing psychological games. Rather, it's about recognizing a profound truth. Your presence is a gift that deserves to be valued, not an unlimited resource to be consumed without appreciation. The digital age has created unprecedented pressure to remain constantly connected, perpetually responsive, eternally available. Notifications demand immediate attention. Messaging platforms display when you're online, when you've read someone's words, how long you've been away. What appears to be connection is often closer to surveillance, a system designed to eliminate the very absence that creates psychological value. In surrendering to these pressures, you forfeit one of your most powerful psychological assets, the ability to create space for others to feel your absence, to appreciate the unique value of your presence precisely because it isn't constantly available. As we move into understanding the consequences of this surrender, remember that reclaiming your strategic unavailability isn't about disconnection. It's about creating the conditions for more meaningful connection, both with yourself and with those who truly value your presence. Have you ever noticed how the light inside you dims a little more with each notification you rush to answer? How the boundaries of your selfhood blur with every interruption you accommodate? This is not coincidence. It's the silent erosion of your most precious resource, your sovereign attention. When you render yourself perpetually available, you aren't merely sharing your time, you're surrendering the very essence of your personal power. This surrender happens so gradually, so quietly, that most never recognize the transaction until the cost has been paid in full. The consequences of constant availability extend far beyond mere exhaustion. They reach into the deepest structures of how others perceive you, how you perceive yourself, and how the delicate dynamics of influence and respect operate in your relationships. Consider the cognitive bias psychologists call the familiarity principle. While familiarity can breed comfort in certain contexts, excessive familiarity inevitably breeds a particular type of devaluation. The mind naturally categorizes consistent stimuli as background information, data to be processed automatically rather than consciously appreciated. Your constant presence, your immediate responses, your unwavering availability, these gradually shift from foreground to background in the consciousness of others. You become, in essence, psychological furniture. This transition happens beneath conscious awareness. No one actively decides to take you for granted. No one intentionally devalues your presence. Yet the architecture of human perception ensures this outcome when anything, including your attention, your emotional support, your physical or digital presence, becomes too readily accessible. Neurologically, this makes perfect sense. The brain is designed to conserve energy by directing attention toward novel stimuli while filtering out consistent background information. When you make yourself perpetually available, you're inadvertently training other people's neural pathways to process you as a constant rather than a variable, as atmospheric rather than essential. The consequences ripple through every dimension of your connections. In your professional life, constant availability signals a dangerous message, that your time holds less value than others. Each immediate response to a non-urgent email, each acceptance of a last-minute request, each sacrifice of your priorities for someone else's emergency. These aren't acts of dedication, but subtle declarations of your secondary status. In your personal relationships, perpetual presence removes the psychological space necessary for appreciation to flourish. When someone never has the opportunity to miss you, to wonder about you, to feel the weight of your absence, they lose the contrast necessary to fully value your presence. In your digital existence, the timestamp that shows you're always online, always responding, always engaged, becomes not evidence of your commitment, but a subtle indicator that you have nowhere more important to be, nothing more valuable to do. Perhaps most devastatingly, perpetual availability costs you your connection to yourself. Every moment spent in reflexive response to external demands is a moment not spent in communion with your own depths, your own wisdom, your own needs. This isn't about embracing coldness or strategic manipulation. It's about recognizing that your attention is sacred, perhaps the most precious gift you can offer another person. And like all precious gifts, its value is diminished when it's treated as an unlimited resource rather than a rare privilege. The most respected figures throughout history, whether in leadership, art, philosophy, or intimate relationships, have intuitively understood this principle. Their physical or psychological absence created the necessary space for their presence to be fully valued when it was offered. Think of the mentor, whose rare words of praise carry weight precisely because they're selectively given. The leader whose occasional appearances generate anticipation rather than indifference. The friend whose undivided attention feels like a gift rather than an expectation. These individuals aren't diminished by their strategic unavailability, they're elevated by it. This understanding transcends simple tactics. It's not about artificially limiting your accessibility, but about reclaiming the natural boundaries that modern life has systematically eroded. It's about remembering that your presence is not a resource to be exploited, but a gift to be cherished, first by you, then by others. As you move through a world that constantly demands your immediate attention, your instant response, your perpetual engagement, remember this. Every moment you protect from unnecessary intrusion is not just self-preservation. It's an act of profound self-respect. Every boundary you establish is not a wall, but a declaration of your inherent value. Your strategic unavailability isn't absence. It's a more powerful form of presence, one that speaks not through constant noise, but through meaningful silence, not through reflexive response, but through intentional engagement. As we turn toward the path of liberation from this trap, remember, the journey back to your power begins not with doing more, but with doing less. Not with being more available, but with being more discerning about where your precious attention flows. The journey back to your authentic power begins with a profound recognition. Your presence is not a commodity to be distributed freely, but a gift to be offered deliberately. This isn't about becoming unreachable. It's about becoming intentional. It's not withdrawal. It's conscious engagement on terms that honor your inherent worth. The art of strategic unavailability operates from a place of self-reverence rather than self-protection. It emerges from the understanding that your energy, attention, and presence are sacred resources, finite, precious, and deserving of careful stewardship. Begin by examining the invisible agreements you've made with the world around you. Each immediate response to a non-urgent message, each sacrifice of your focus for external demands, each compression of your boundaries to accommodate others' expectations. These aren't merely habits, but unconscious contracts, silent permissions you've granted for others to access your most valuable resource, your sovereign attention. The first step toward reclaiming your power is renegotiating these contracts, not through declaration, but through action. Start with the digital realm, where the pressure for perpetual presence is most relentless. Turn off notifications that don't serve your highest purpose. Create deliberate windows for communication, rather than remaining perpetually accessible. Allow messages to wait until you've chosen to engage with them, rather than interrupting your natural rhythm to engage the moment they arrive. This isn't rudeness, it's respect for the natural cadence of meaningful exchange. It's recognition that thoughtful response is more valuable than immediate reaction. It's honoring the depth possible only when communication happens from centeredness rather than fragmentation. In your personal relationships, practice the power of delayed response, not as manipulation, but as a commitment to engage from fullness rather than obligation. When you respond only after you've had space to process, to feel, to center yourself, you bring your whole being to the exchange rather than a fragmented fraction of your attention. Notice how this creates a subtle but profound shift in dynamic. Your responses become gifts rather than obligations. Your presence becomes an experience rather than an expectation. Your attention becomes something others value precisely because it's offered consciously rather than automatically. In professional contexts, establish clear boundaries around your availability. Communicate when you'll be accessible and when you'll be focused elsewhere. This isn't diminishing your commitment, it's enhancing your effectiveness. It's recognizing that your best work emerges from sustained attention rather than constant interruption. The most respected leaders throughout history have understood this principle implicitly. Their strategic unavailability wasn't a withdrawal from responsibility, but an embodiment of it. They recognized that being perpetually accessible made them receptive to the urgent at the expense of the important, trapped in response mode rather than creation mode. As you embrace strategic unavailability, you'll encounter resistance, both external and internal. Others may initially interpret your boundaries as rejection. Your own conditioning may trigger guilt or fear when you choose selective presence over constant availability. Recognize these reactions as evidence of the very patterns you're working to transform. The discomfort is not a signal to retreat, but confirmation that you're disrupting established dynamics that have served others' needs while depleting your power. When you feel this resistance, remember, your strategic unavailability creates space not just for others to value your presence more deeply, but for you to return to the wellspring of your own wisdom. In the silence between external demands, you rediscover your voice. In the pauses between responses, you reconnect with your truth. This practice transcends simple tactics to become a philosophy of presence, one that values depth over frequency, quality over quantity, intention over habit. It's about moving from reflexive response to reflective engagement, from constant partial attention to periodic full presence. The paradox reveals itself. By becoming strategically unavailable, you become truly present when you do engage. By protecting your boundaries, you create the conditions for genuine connection rather than superficial contact. Your strategic unavailability becomes a quiet revolution, a reclaiming of your inherent power, a declaration that your presence is valuable precisely because it's intentional rather than automatic, chosen rather than compulsory. This isn't about becoming distant. It's about creating the necessary space for meaningful closeness. It's not about disconnection, but about conscious connection. First with yourself, then selectively with those who honor your essence. As we move toward the ultimate realization that awaits, remember, the journey of reclaiming your power through strategic unavailability isn't about what you're taking away from others. It's about what you're giving back to yourself. And ultimately, the deeper quality of presence you're then able to offer the world. There exists a profound truth at the intersection of psychology and human connection. A truth so counterintuitive yet so powerful that once embraced, it forever transforms how you move through the world. Your most meaningful presence is created not through constant availability, but through the conscious curation of your absence. This isn't about manipulation, but honoring the natural rhythm of human connection, the ebb and flow that creates the emotional tides in which relationships thrive. Just as music requires silence between notes to create melody, human connection requires space to create resonance. When you embrace strategic unavailability as a practice of self-reverence, your presence intensifies precisely because it's no longer diluted by constant accessibility. Like a rare element whose value stems from its scarcity, your deliberate engagement becomes something others not only notice, but treasure. In intimate relationships, your strategic unavailability creates space for desire to breathe, for appreciation to deepen, for others to experience the contrast between your presence and absence. The human heart grows fonder in the space of longing, values what it fears losing, appreciates what it cannot take for granted. In professional contexts, your selective engagement elevates your contributions from expected to exceptional. When you're not perpetually accessible, your input carries greater weight. Your words land with more impact precisely because they aren't constantly flowing. Your presence becomes an event rather than a backdrop. In creative pursuits, the spaces you create become the fertile void from which your deepest insights emerge. Every great artist, writer, and innovator understands this principle, that creation requires periods of retreat, that wisdom surfaces not in constant engagement, but in the sacred spaces between. Even in digital existence, your strategic absence creates a powerful mystique. While others exhaust themselves responding to every notification, your selective participation stands out precisely because it doesn't conform to expectations. The most profound transformation occurs within. As you reclaim the sovereignty of your attention, you discover that your value was never determined by your availability. Your worth exists independent of external validation. Your power resides not in proving yourself through constant presence, but in honoring yourself through conscious choice. This is the liberation, freedom from the exhausting performance of perpetual engagement. Your strategic unavailability isn't absence at all. It's presence of the most profound kind, presence with yourself. It's honoring your inner landscape rather than constantly responding to external terrain. In embracing this truth, what you feared losing by becoming less available, connection, relevance, belonging, actually deepens through selective engagement. Your relationships become more authentic because they're built on mutual appreciation rather than constant access. The ultimate paradox: by allowing yourself to be less accessible, you become more deeply seen. By creating space between your responses, you allow your words to carry greater weight. Your presence is a gift too valuable to be distributed without discernment. In the quiet power of your strategic unavailability, you don't become less visible, you become unforgettable. Not through constant performance, but through meaningful presence when you choose to offer it.